now, the Texas Capitol is littered with ideas of what could have been this session. Thousands of bills put forward by lawmakers now have no chance of moving forward as key deadlines passed with only 4 days left in the session.
However, lawmakers do not have much time to mourn some of those passion projects. They are too busy staying up late voting on a flurry of other bills in these final few days. Some are wondering whether there's a higher likelihood a special session could extend their work here in Austin. Today, for some insight, we are joined by two former state lawmakers to talk through all of this. Dennis Bonnen, former Speaker of the House who represented Southeast Texas. Mark Strama previously served as a representative for the Austin area. So welcome back to you both. We know it's such a busy time. We appreciate it. We want to start with, we know Governor Abbott named bail reform as one of his top emergency items, priority items this session. We did see legislation connected to that fail in the House this week. For our viewers, a bit of background, a bill known as Jocelyn's Law did not secure the votes that it needed to move forward. Do we think that the governor could call lawmakers back to give that another go?
Could he? Absolutely. Will he? Possibly. A bail reform bill has passed the House, and so will that be sufficient for the governor? I don't know. And then the better question I ask is, why aren't they getting to 100 votes on that bill? I mean, that bill is hard to vote against, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's one of those where Democrats are outfoxing themselves because it's an awkward vote to take, saying no to that. I mean, it's protecting young children and folks from heinous situations, and it's a pretty narrow bill. It's not broad, it's not overreaching. And so could the governor call folks back? Absolutely he could. Will he? We'll have to see.
Mark, any response to how Democrats are responding to that bill in particular?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say to your original question, I'd be surprised if he called a special session over it. There is a lot happening in bail reform here. There's things happening at local levels, at the county level, around the state. I don't think governors expect to run the table, and overall, his priority legislation has fared pretty well this session. It's not uncommon to lose something like this. Why did the Democrats vote against it? A large number of the Democrats voted against it. Some voted for it. What I have heard from Democrats is just a frustration with feeling like they've been run over all session and feeling like the rhetoric around that bill attacked the communities they represent. I don't disagree with you that it's a hard vote to defend, but remember, and I say it over and over again, they only have to defend it in a primary. Because of gerrymandering, general elections don't matter in the vast majority of districts, so these representatives, you have Republicans only voting on issues that their primary voters care about, and you have Democrats, in this case, having to defend a vote that they only have to defend in their primary. And when they feel that the rhetoric around the bill has attacked the communities they represent, what they really mean is the folks who vote in their Democratic primary. And so the politics that nobody's going to lose an election over that vote, and that's because we don't have a very democratic system.
The other thing I'll point out to Mark's comment, the Democrats just feel like they've kind of been run over and what have you. I don't think that's entirely fair. Of course, they have the right to feel that way. I think there are bigger issues that no one wants to talk about. We started this session saying that somehow if a Democrat chaired a committee with the majority of Republicans on it, it was just the worst thing ever. And so you start looking at what was forced upon Democrats in the House by outside voices. I think the Democrats feel run over, not because so many bills they hate have passed, I think plenty have, that they don't care for, but I think it's the cumulative effect of no chairmanships, no this, no that. And candidly, I think you have to question, is it the end of the world for a decent member who does a good job to chair a committee of the opposite party with the majority of the majority party in control of that committee? And in turn, they might feel less beat up, less beat down, or less forced out of the process when you have votes that quite candidly could save a life.
You know, I don't disagree. Obviously, we agree that that this practice, the historical practice in Texas of allowing members of the minority party to chair a committee has been a good practice, and it has generally led to a process where there's less bad feeling at the end of a session by the minority party, which is a desirable outcome whichever party's in control.
And here's why.
And this is an example.
Right.
All of that said, I think it's more issue focused. I think that, losing on vouchers, losing on THC, losing on so many big issues that members genuinely care about. I mean, That's just created a climate where I don't hear people critiquing the process, right? Even in the minority party, with the compromises that were made at the beginning of the session, I don't hear it being so much about process as about substance.
We do want to get to another topic
Sure.
in addition to what we just discussed. So a bill that would ban products containing THC is now on the governor's desk. We're unsure if he's going to sign that into law at this point. The lieutenant governor, though, called a news conference yesterday, and it was really meant to chastise us in the media for not reporting on what he calls the dangers of THC. Now, I was looking on social media, of course, that's in that environment, but they were saying that this might be a way for the lieutenant governor to influence what the governor's decision might be. What do you all think of that?
I think that it's being read into too much. Is it weird the lieutenant governor had a press conference? No. Is it interesting that one of the best communicators we've ever seen in Texas politics drove his message? No.
I guess the timing is what it is, because the bill is already passed in the Senate and in the House, and it's now on the governor's desk.
If you listen, the press conference also spoke about TCUP. And the TCUP program had just passed the Senate. It's gone to the House. There'll probably be a conference committee. So I think he was talking about both. He's probably also trying to influence the governor, sure. But my point is, this is what Dan Patrick's really good at doing. This is not unusual. This is what he does at an exceptional level all the time. And he also, it's a great, and I'm guilty of it, great move Republicans like to make. It's the press that didn't get it right. The press script, who I actually saw really coming hard at the lieutenant governor on the ban of hemp, was more social media and conservative voices in social media and veterans and those type folks. I mean, no disrespect, I hope it doesn't come off that way, but to the media, I didn't see y'all as a big part of that. I saw a lot of social media influence from conservative voices, veterans voices. Those type voices are who I think put the lieutenant governor back on his heels.
Well, where this gets interesting is on that question. This is the most unpopular bill the legislature has passed. Vouchers is unpopular with Democratic partisans. The THC issue is, banning THC is unpopular across the board. And so look, yeah, you're right. I don't think the lieutenant governor was necessarily trying to manipulate the governor. I think he's trying to manipulate public opinion, which, as you say,
he's good at. Yeah.
I don't think that it's going to be particularly persuasive to the governor. I think the governor's got to decide, going into an election year, running for re-election, presumably, does he want to sign a bill that takes away a right people in Texas have grown attached to, when he may be facing the most adverse political climate he's ever had to run in. I mean, look, I've never been one to be overly optimistic about Democrats' chances in this state. During the time I've been in politics, we haven't won anything. But you're looking at a very unpopular president in an off year with potentially a pretty bad economy if the president has his way, and passing a very unpopular bill like THC, and a bill that didn't have any real support among the grassroots, like the voucher bill. It's a tough record to run on.
I disagree, but in fairness to Governor Abbott, I'll tell you what he's going to do. He's going to do what Governor Abbott always does that I don't know if enough people understand. He's a lawyer, he was a judge, a Supreme Court judge, he was Attorney General. He's going to do what he does every session when it ends. He is going to study these issues. He gets into these issues in far beyond what any chief executive does. He will understand the policy. He will understand the implications. I think that teacup bill is one he's going to look seriously hard at when it gets to his desk, if it does, which I think it will. And what do those two bills together create in the environment for Texans who have pain and need, okay? And so Governor Abbott is, no disrespect to Lieutenant Governor, he is not going to be able to influence the governor too significantly, because the governor is very smart and intelligent and dives into the policy and the facts and the issues on these bills when they land on his desk, to the point that at times I didn't like what he might have done to one or two of my bills, and it's because he learned it too well, and I wish he'd just done it on a surface level. Greg Abbott is not a surface level governor. He dives into the issues. He'll understand these things.
We just have a little bit of time left. I know we could probably continue on the THC ban for quite some time and what's going to happen with compassionate use. Real briefly here, we want to tell our audience The ACLU of Texas and a few other groups came out today threatening a lawsuit if Governor Abbott signs a bill requiring schools to put the 10 Commandments in public school classrooms. So talking about the influence of whether it's the Lieutenant Governor or public opinion, groups like the ACLU threatening legal action, how much influence could that have on the governor signing a bill into law?
I'll let Mark have most of the time here because I know he's excited to do that. And I don't mean that. I mean, I get you. The governor's not going to be threatened or fearful of the ACLU or anyone else on whether he chooses to sign a bill or not. I'll go back to what I just said. He will look at the policy. He will learn the policy if he doesn't already know it well, and he will understand it. He was Attorney General. He'll know whether to fear that lawsuit, and frankly, I don't think he's going to. That's not a group that frightens Greg Abbott.
Well, I mean, even if he thought he was going to lose, he'd sign the bill because, again, he's appealing to the base in a partisan primary environment. Look, for folks who might not have watched the debate, which is probably everybody, James Tallarico from here in Austin landed some really good arguments from the back mic during the debate. One of the points he made was, we're here debating putting the 10 Commandments in every classroom on a Saturday, which is the Jewish Sabbath. We're going to adopt it on third reading on a Sunday, which is the Christian Sabbath. And it's explicitly prohibited to do that in the 10 Commandments. Do you really want kindergarten classrooms inviting the question about adultery to kindergartners? I mean, James, who is himself in divinity school, speaks to this from the perspective of a person of deep Christian faith and thinks it's a really un-Christian bill. And I think he was pretty persuasive.
And a legal challenge in Louisiana came against this very same legislation. So again, we'll have to wait and see on that. But Dennis and Mark, thank you both for your perspective. We appreciate it as always.
Still to come here.